we do not stop being human when we become vegan. There's this whole argument in the, vegan, plant-based, movements, and I will say movements because it's not about becoming a robot or not becoming human. The word vegan is effective and necessary, and there's a time and a place where I feel like it's the opposite. How do you reconcile that part of who you are and your lifestyle with the fact that you don't want to hurt animals?
All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Fit Vegan Podcast. Today, we have an extraordinary guest who has been an influential voice in the vegan movement for over 2 decades. She's a best-selling author, speaker, and educator whose work has touched the lives of countless people through her inspiring message of compassion and conscious living. Known as the Joyful Vegan, Colleen Patrick-Goudreau has written numerous books, including the 30-Day Vegan Challenge and the Joy of Vegan Baking, and has been a powerful advocate for living a plant-based lifestyle in a way that is joyful, sustainable, and accessible to all. So through her talks, books, and podcasts, Colleen empowers people to make informed choices that align with their values while enjoying delicious, nourishing food along the way. So today we're going to dive deep into her journey as a vegan advocate, the impact of her work on individuals and a movement as a whole, and how living a compassionate life can truly transform not just your health, but the world. So I'm beyond excited for this episode. All right, welcome to the Fit Vegan Podcast. I'm your show host, Maxime, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fit Vegan Coaching, a company that is on a mission to help 10,000 people get lean, thrive, and reduce their risk of chronic illnesses by 2033 and 1 million by 2050. I believe that having a fit, healthy body and mind is the foundation to living an incredible life, and this is what we'll show will give you if you choose to listen and implement. Enjoy the episode and have a great day. Colleen, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So good to be here.
Yes, I'm happy that a friend that we have in common, Bridie from World Vegan Travel, connected us a few weeks ago, and now we're here recording.
I love it. Thank you so much. It's so much fun.
Yeah, I know you guys do some trips together, right? Like you have some upcoming trips planned with her?
We do. Yeah, we do a lot of trips together. They were travelers on a trip that I had done back in 2014 with another travel company. And long story short, we decided to partner and do our own trips together because they had a background in tour leading. So here we are being partners in business, but also good friends, which is not always easy to do. And yeah. I'm really grateful we've been able, because the friendship would come first if anything ever happened. But we're able to do both, and we just love traveling with them. So I think we've been to 18 countries together, the four of us.
Oh, beautiful. What's the next upcoming trip you guys have together?
So we're leaving soon for Rwanda. So November is Rwanda, and that'll be our 5th time doing this trip. Bridie and Seb were just there with Seb's mom, so this is their 6th time, but this will be our 5th trip together.
Oh, beautiful. You know what's funny is I got connected with Bridie, I believe, through Robert Cheek, and as I jumped on a podcast with her, I figured out where they lived in Squamish, BC, and literally she was living across the street from where I was living last year, and I didn't even know she lived there. I didn't know World Vegan Travel, but she was literally 5 minutes like across the street from where I lived in Squamish.
Oh my gosh. I didn't realize that. We were there last year. It's lovely. We hadn't been there before, and my husband and I drove up, and it's a great place, but I did not know you had been there and lived so close.
Yeah. Squamish is a beautiful place. Yes. Awesome. Well, I'd love to dive into your story. I'm sure a lot of the listeners already know who you are, but from some of the new ones, you usually get a blend of people that are already whole food, plant-based, already vegan, but many of them that are a little bit more intrigued into veganism, especially with the name Fit Vegan. They're like, those two can go together. And so we have a lot of newer people to this space. So do you mind kind of sharing a little bit of your story as to what got you to jump into this vegan space over 2 decades ago?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm sure there's plenty of people who don't know me. It's a much bigger space today than it was when I first started out. And equally, I think people are surprised that joyful and vegan can go together.
Yeah.
There's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of perceptions about veganism, and some of them are true and some of them are not. So that's pretty much sums up what I do, is to just debunk the myths and kind of create a helpful way to look at this thing called vegan, plant-based, whatever you want to call it. So this is Charlie, who's joining me here on video, as you can see,
Hello,
one of
Charlie.
my babies. So yeah, so as I mentioned earlier, when we were off mic, I grew up in the East Coast. I grew up in New Jersey, and I ate everything that walked and swam and flew. I grew up in a meat-eating household, and my parents fed me everything that you can imagine, especially on the East Coast. There was a lot of veal, a lot of pork,
Yeah.
a lot of beef, a lot of the kind of really heavier animal meats, and liked it all. My father actually owned ice cream stores, so we had a lot of dairy. We had a separate freezer just for the ice cream he would bring home from the ice cream stores. I mean, so pretty
Okay.
much all of it, right? I mean, just all of it. And it's not it was a pretty good way to grow up. I mean, I didn't have any qualms about that. However, I was also an animal lover, and my parents supported that. We adopted a dog. Well, I don't think we adopted, well, I mean, technically we adopted a dog. It was a family nearby who had a dog who had a litter of puppies. And so we adopted a dog. And I was that kid who loved being with animals, who loved watching movies about animals. I was typical in that I think most of us, wherever we grew up, were raised wearing clothing that had images of animals all over our clothing, all over our wallpaper, all over our bedclothes, on our lunch boxes. I mean, in every way,
Yeah.
we were taught to sing songs that were about animals. We watched movies, we were read books. And actually, I'm really fascinated by this, because this is one of the things I do in my work, is to normalize veganism, i.e. living compassionately, because most of us were raised being compassionate. And most of us were raised, as I said, having these images all over our clothing, et cetera, but also being taught the most fundamental skills of reading and counting and spelling, right? Using animals. Like, the animals were our teachers, right? All the toys and the games and everything we're given, it's all
Yeah.
animals, because we recognize as a species that we have a deep connection to other species, and children especially. So I was that kid. And, I always say that you don't have to love animals to not want to hurt them. I just happen to be one of those kids and adults who loves being around animals, but you don't have to be an animal lover to just not want to, contribute to violence against them. So I was that kid, loved animals, loved eating meat, had no idea I was, hurting one by doing the other, and was given
Yeah.
the, typical excuses most of us are given. They're here for us. They don't feel the same pain. They sacrifice themselves for us, kind of all the things. And my parents didn't say those things because they were trying to hurt me. They actually told me those things because they were aware that I was sensitive and compassionate, and they didn't want to hurt me.
Yeah.
So, right, those are the things that we tell ourselves and each other. And so I went about my life just, continuing to eat animals, but I always had something. I think we could say I didn't think about it, but I think we do think about it. That's why we come up with these excuses. So when I was getting older and was saying things like, yeah, I only get free range eggs and I only get organic milk, or whatever that means, it's coming from a place of awareness that I didn't want to hurt anybody. And yet I wasn't willing to look at what even those products were doing to harm animals. And so kind of went about my life until I was about 19. I was working in a bookstore, and I picked up Diet for a New America. I had also worked in a health food store, so I'd always been very interested in health and just learning. I've always been a curious person. I've always been someone who wanted to just, I'm a lifelong learner. And so I was interested in health and nutrition. But I picked up the book called Diet for a New America that John Robbins wrote back in the late 80s. And it was the first book that talked about the effects of consuming animal products and raising animals on the environment, on our health, and on the animals. And it was mind-blowing. It was paradigm shifting. It was life-changing. I mean, it really, really was the first thing that made me step into, okay, I need to learn more and I need to do something different. So I stopped eating land animals. I kept eating the, dairy and the eggs. I just didn't make the connection, or didn't want to make the connection because it was too inconvenient.
Yeah.
And I went about that way for a few years, became an animal advocate. I mean, I was an animal advocate before I was technically vegan. I was doing advocacy and awareness raising around, puppy mills and vivisection and kind of other things as well for, just kind of all the other ways that I was learning that animals were harmed, but I was still consuming animal products. And then I read a book, and I always joke about this because I was reading happy books too. But I read a book called Slaughterhouse
Yeah.
several years later. And that was the book. If Diet for New America compelled me to say, I don't want to be part of how animals are treated, being raised for human consumption, Slaughterhouse, which was an investigative journalist who went into slaughterhouses and talked to the slaughterhouse workers and asked the same questions, etc. Slaughterhouse compelled me to say, I don't want to be a part of what is inevitably a culture of violence. There is no way to separate killing animals from violence. You just can't separate the two. The animals do not
Yeah.
walk into the chute. They do not slit their own throats. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's this idea that they're suicidal animals. And so it was the book, it was the text that opened my eyes completely. And I was actually in LA at the time. I was in Southern California. I was working in tech, just doing some writing at the time. And I was at some stupid tech conference. And I say stupid because I'm reading this book that, was about, to me, the most fundamental aspects of who we are and what we care about. And I was looking at every thing around me and saying, this doesn't make any sense, and this is meaningless compared to what I'm learning. And I called my husband and I said, I don't even know what this means, but I'm vegan now, right? I don't know what it means. I mean, I don't know what it means, meaning, I was vegetarian and pescatarian kind of off and on together. And my husband was at that point also vegetarian, kind of having fish sometimes. And I say, I don't know what it means, just meaning that I only knew that there was this word that characterized the fact that I didn't want to consume any animal products at all anymore, anything that came out of or off of an animal and wear them. It was just this kind of eye-opening experience. And that was the beginning of just bumping up my activism, my advocacy, and it started me on the path that I'm in now, still questioning, what can I do to help? What can I do to raise awareness so other people can also have, the potential awakening? And that was 25 years ago. So I started doing awareness raising immediately, because if the narrative was, well, I didn't know, but once I knew, I didn't want to be part of it, then I wanted to be that conduit for others to say, let me shine a light on this and do with it what you want. I've never, in the 25 years I've been vegan or an advocate, I have never said, go vegan. I've never had to,
Yeah.
because just by virtue of sharing what I know and what is true, people can draw their own conclusions. I mean, obviously I'm calling myself vegan. I'm calling myself joyful vegan. I'm handing out literature that's called, at the time it was vegan outreaches, literature, so, I mean, I wasn't hiding it, but I didn't have to say, go vegan. You got to go vegan. I would just say, I would just share and show video and share literature about what was happening. And so that's what I've always done. It's what I continue to do, is raise awareness. And then what I've also done is orient people to a way of thinking about it so that it feels, congruous with their values already. So it doesn't feel like it's something so different. What I try to do is orient people to a very joyful way of living so that it feels effortless, so that it feels good. And that's the whole point. It shouldn't feel bad to live
Yeah.
according to our own values, right? So that's what I do and how I do it. And I'm sure there's lots more to say.
Yeah. Well, there's so many questions I want to ask and directions. So again, that was 25 years ago when you kind of made that transition and you kind of set yourself on this path and this mission that you're on, that you've been able to stay passionate on for the past 25 years. So I'm curious, how have you seen the reception of your message change from 25 years ago to now? I'm sure there was some ebbs and flows and some fluctuation, but I'm curious how you've seen the world change to the message that you've been spreading consistently for 25 years.
Oh, so I have always had the experience and felt and truly had the experience and seen people want this information. There is nothing new today in terms of people being more compassionate today than they were 25
Yeah.
years ago, or 50 or 100, or whatever. People are the same as they've always been, period. And I will get to what I think is different today. But in terms of the reception, 100% the same. People would see what I would share or say and say, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be part of that. I am a compassionate person. And by the way, my message is also about living healthfully. So it would also be around nutrition. And of course, those are some of the biggest questions we get is around the nutrients. And so I would be sharing that. And they would say, I don't want to be unhealthy. I want to feel better. I want to look better, all the things, right? So no difference. I would say the difference is the accessibility of plant-based products that are better than they were when I first went vegan. Now, I have been eating vegetables and whole foods the entire time I've been vegan. And so when people say, what did you eat when, 25 years ago? I'm like, vegetables and fruits and nuts and seeds and beans and mushrooms and grains and herbs and spices, right? I mean, the same thing that's available today. There's nothing new about that. But I will say, and even though my diet is a foundation of whole foods for the most part, like having, a nice, creamy soft cheese to go with wine and cracker, those are better today than they were.
For sure.
100%. Thank goodness for the sophistication of these companies and these innovators. 100%.
Yes. Yeah. Because it was like melted plastic cheese before. I remember I've been vegan for a decade going on next month. And just 10 years ago, you put that in the oven and it looked the same. It was just hot. The cheese was still the same size.
Exactly. So it's much better. And even just the branding is better. I think when I first became vegan, so that was in 99, we were still coming off of, I think, the health food, vegan or vegetarian or, whatever you called it. We called it then. I mean, we called it different things. But I think it was coming off of the 60s, 70s, 80s, of the branding that was kind of hippie. I hate to say that as a dirty word, but kind of not modern, not sophisticated, right?
Yeah, it was like you're growing hair under your arms and you're not showering type of hippie. Like that was the perception of it back then. That's how I was painted to me from my parents when I said that I would go vegan. They said that I would transform into one of those people.
One of those people. You probably weren't already shaving under your arms, so you probably would have been
I was
fine
not at
for
that
you.
age, no.
Or maybe you were. But yeah, wearing hemp, that you live in some commune, and all of the stereotypes. But some of it was true. And so my first book was The Joy of Vegan Baking, and it is still to this day in print and still a best-selling book. It transformed. I mean, it was one of the first books that was just, it's a vegan baking book. Isa Moskowitz had come out. I think by then she'd had her cookies book out, but I think it was the first baking book that had a variety of different baked goods, and the whole point was to say that this isn't very different. I mean, we want fat and salt and texture and moisture and leavening. We don't need animal products. But when that book came out, I mean, it was, I think it just really changed things. And people were surprised that you could have baked goods that obviously tasted good without animal products. But the problem was that a lot, it's fine, I don't care. But there were a couple, negative reviews when it first came out saying, oh my God, she's using sugar. And I'm like, this isn't meant to be a health food book. It is a baking book. It's a baking book. And so I'm not, I'm not trying to, if I've often said, if you want to, eat, healthy, eat broccoli. If you want to eat broccoli, that's great. I mean, that's going to be the best thing, right? But if you want to eat a healthy baked good, then eat broccoli, because the whole point of a baked good is indulgence. That doesn't mean you eat
Yeah.
it every day, but it's meant to be, satisfying and pleasurable. And of course, again, I think, people are doing some really innovative things with different textures today in products. But of course, you can make your black bean, brownies, and you can do all that, which is great. The point is, there's a time and a place. There's a time for
Yeah.
broccoli and there's a time for chocolate cake. So yeah, I think a lot of it came out of these, this kind of misconception. And so today, I guess, so besides the products that I think are better and more sophisticated, and the future is just exciting in terms of that, I think the other thing is that the word vegan, I think, is just a little more mainstream than it was when I first became vegan. I think that's a big difference.
Yeah. It's definitely, I feel like it's gone its ups and downs in terms of like, I think there was a point where vegan was taking a hit and it was affecting us at Fit Vegan Coaching. And I was like, damn, should I change the name to be a bit more neutral, but still continue to do whole food plant-based? But I was like, man, it's such a good name and it's tattooed in my biceps, so I can't really change it. So gotta keep it. But there's been moments where veganism, especially online, took a big hit, right? I was watching your interview with Alan Fisher, and I think it was in that interview you brought up that only vegans do videos of like why I'm no longer vegan. Like people don't do that when they do keto or paleo or anything like that. It seems to be specifically for veganism. And I think there was a wave a few years ago where a bunch of big influencers made videos about why they quit veganism. And so, yeah, how do you feel that the word vegan, how it's like if there was like a rating of like how good or bad it is now, like where do you feel it stands compared to a few years ago?
Gosh, that's a good question. The rating. It is okay. My answers are never short, Maxime. I'm sorry.
That's what we're on the podcast. We got time.
Good. Good, we have time because it's so complex because language is complex. And
Yeah.
I'm someone who loves language. My background in academic studies is language and linguistics, and I'm really fascinated by it because I think it's complicated, and I talk about this a lot in my own work, that there's a time where I think, in a place where I think the word vegan is effective and necessary and helpful, and there's a time and a place where I feel like it's the opposite. And that varies and it fluctuates.
Hmm.
So calling myself vegan, I think, I embrace it. I obviously have embraced it. Obviously, same
Yeah.
thing. I don't have a tattoo, but I am the joyful vegan. I've embraced that, right?
Yeah.
The title of every one of my books has vegan in it. I'm not trying to not use the word because I think it's better for SEO or whatever. So the way I feel is, call yourself what is authentic for you. So whether or not it ranks high or not, if it resonates for you and it is meaningful for you to call yourself vegan or fit vegan or joyful vegan or whatever vegan, then do it, because that's the most important thing, is that you're coming from a place of authenticity.
Yeah.
But there's this whole argument in the, vegan, plant-based, movements. And I will say movements, because I think that's part of the problem, is that we think it's one movement.
Yeah.
And in thinking it's one single movement is where we think there are imposters and people betraying the movement. That's the problem, is that this isn't one movement. There are different motivations for one versus the other, but we all share a commonality. So we can talk more about that. But if it resonates for you to call yourself plant-based and identify as someone who is plant-based, do it if that's what's authentic for you. Where I think the word vegan backfires is when it comes to talking about food and ingredients and on menus and on, food labels, that kind of thing. That's where I
Yeah.
think it really backfires.
Yeah. It's yeah, you talked earlier about like people having to feel like they have to justify, right, as to why they are, eating meat or they're not fully vegan yet. I feel like on the flip side, I don't know for you, you've been at it for 25 years, so longer than I have, but I feel like everyone goes through phases of their veganism. Like they turn vegan and it's like the evangelist phase where you're trying to save everyone. and you go really hard. And then there's a point where you've been at it long enough that you kind of pick and choose your moments, and then you kind of mature more into it. And then you're like, well, if I just lead by example and I show the proof, like I don't need to do too much outside of me just doing me and people noticing. And it's kind of like shining your light, and people are attracted to it. Yeah, I feel like there's kind of these different waves. So I feel like obviously call myself a vegan, but when I'm at restaurants, I just like a lot of times I don't say anything. I just order my things like, hey, just make sure there's none of this is this in there. And like I pick my battles because sometimes it's just too much to have that conversation with someone and you're just not in the mood for it. You know, it's like, I just want to eat food. I don't want to have an argument. I don't want to have to explain why I'm living my life the way that I'm living. So how do you navigate that with people?
I very much out myself every opportunity I have, because I find that, to your point, people will bite and they want to know more. And
Yeah.
now I will say that doesn't mean you have to be in the mood or want to be in the mood every time. I get it. Not every time you do. You don't want to always advocate just when you want, some rice and beans, right? I mean,
Quiet dinner with your wife, you know, I just want to eat
exactly.
food.
The problem with my poor husband is he knows that I am, and not that you aren't, but I am an advocate through and through. And I just can't not pass up. I can't pass up an opportunity. And that doesn't mean every second. I don't walk around. This is just me. I don't walk around with vegan t-shirts. I just don't. I don't wear t-shirts, So,
Yeah.
I mean, we're all different. But in terms of the interaction with someone, so yesterday I gave blood. And I was, he was looking at my, the hemoglobin, and he was looking at my blood pressure and my weight and everything. And he was really impressed. I mean, I tend to have kind of lower blood pressure generally. So he was like, wow, you're really calm. I'm like, no, I'm enraged right now because I was really annoyed that something had happened right before I came. I'm
Yeah.
like, no, I said, but I've been vegan 25 years, so that probably helps. And immediately he went, really? Oh my gosh, 25 years. Tell me. And of course he asked the same questions that we're
Yeah.
all used to. He asked the P question. He did.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love it. It's such an opportunity to share a positive, example. And so
Yeah.
when it comes to interactions, I actually love it. But when it comes to talking about the food, or for food companies in terms of labeling or what you call that product, the reason I think it backfires is because, unfortunately, there tends to be, or not unfortunately, just the way humans are, we tend to compartmentalize ourselves, and our identity plays a huge part in who we are, how we navigate the world. And identity is a big part of it. And we tend to be pretty compartmentalized, and we tend to think if I'm one thing, I'm not another, which is silly because
Yeah.
we're many things. We are so many things. And so the problem is, if you have, I mean, and the research bears this out, and the data bear this out, and you'd be interested in this, I think. But, there's a lot of really good research on, restaurants and menus and what to call them. And I'm someone who does not believe we should have a separate vegan menu. I'm someone who believes that we should not put the word vegan on a food menu. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have a little code, a little key,
The
so
little
that
leaf on the
a little
side.
leaf, because people who are vegan are going to, or plant-based, whatever, we're going to advocate for ourselves. Just like if you're gluten-free or oil-free or sugar-free, you're going to advocate for yourself. You're going to ask, and you're going to look for the thing that you're looking for. But I don't want to solve for me, because I'm going to solve for me. I don't want a
Yeah.
restaurant to solve for me. I want the restaurant to have the plant-based options. I want them to have the foods that are going to be suitable for vegans. But I don't want them to solve for me in what they name the thing. I want them to solve for the non-vegans. And we see again and again, restaurants with the best intention will have a separate vegan menu. They'll have a separate vegan section on the menu, or they'll have things that are called, like, vegan burger. No one is going to order that, and no one is going to ask for the vegan menu unless you're vegan.
Yeah. It's true.
So we feel special when we walk into a restaurant, and look, we deserve to feel special. We're doing good things, and it's exhausting sometimes. Like, I get wanting to just, as you said, kind of, right. It's exhausting. You don't want to constantly have to, ask and, figure it out and order off the menu. It's great that they have the options. The problem is, I mean, I went to a restaurant with a girlfriend last week, and it was a Mexican restaurant, and a nicer Mexican restaurant. It wasn't like a Taco Bell. It wasn't like
Yeah.
a Chipotle. It was a nicer Mexican restaurant. And they have a separate vegan menu. And we walked in, and I think they do this with every customer, which is great in terms of training, because all of this comes down to management training the staff
Yeah.
and how they frame it on the menu, et cetera. But one of the things they do is when they give you the menu, they say, would you like the vegan menu as well? And I was telling the server this, and I need to just contact the management. I was saying, don't do that, because only the vegans are going to say yes. And then what happens is the management says, I tried, I had vegan options, I had a separate vegan menu, I put it on my menu, and not enough people bought it, so we stopped having those options. The
Yeah.
problem is that they're just doing it wrong. They're doing it right in terms of having the options. They're doing it wrong in terms of how they frame it. And that goes for also products. That goes for calling something, vegan cheese or vegan meat, right? I mean, same thing. And we see this with, with companies like Beyond, like Impossible, and that's what some of the research bears out too. If a restaurant says Beyond Burger, people are drawn to that because they know the name now. They've had brand
Yeah.
recognition. They've done it really well. Same with Impossible. Maybe a couple others. I don't think other brands have been as recognizable as those two in terms of kind of non-vegan restaurants.
Yeah, I
Um,
think it would be the two biggest ones for these two. It's
yeah,
no, I get what you mean. If they put the vegan menu, only the vegans will eat it. But if they don't, then it just embed it into the menu. The people that are not vegan would potentially just order it because they don't know that it's vegan, or it just looks good, and they might order it and actually eat something plant based, and then discover that it is plant based, and potentially just kind of open up their mind a little bit more.
absolutely. And even so, keep it on the menu, as we said, have a little leaf, have a little key, but don't call it, if you call it a vegan burger, even if you call it, and I have a feeling, and I haven't asked, Beyond or Impossible this, but I have a feeling that contractually they say, you call this Beyond or you call this Impossible, you put my little trademark, little registered trademark. You don't call it vegan Beyond Burger, don't call it vegan burger, you have to call it Beyond. And that's the kind of stuff. And so same thing with, like, let's just say it's a non-brand item, let's say it's a vegetable stir fry. Don't call it a vegan stir fry, call it smoky, delicious, creamy rice, whatever, like, call it
Yeah.
something so that it's really appealing and enticing. So that's how I feel about the word vegan. It's not always straightforward, but I will say I get in a lot of trouble with other vegans around this. I mean, my audience gets it. They know I've been talking about this for 25 years, but some people who don't understand what I'm saying and are too quick to react. I have said a million times, vegans overuse the word vegan when it comes to talking about food. And I think that's
Yeah.
also problematic, because if we just keep saying vegan food and vegan dish and vegan restaurant and vegan that, it makes it sound like it's a separate food group and it's only for vegans. And I think it's really problematic. So I think we overuse it. It doesn't mean don't ever use it in the context that is appropriate, but
Yeah.
just call it a banana, just call it a meal, just call it a stir fry, just call it a donut. If someone
Yeah.
knows you're vegan, you don't have to say I eat a vegan donut. It's you're vegan, so it's okay. So I think it can be really overused. So I think there's just a lot to say about the word itself, even though I use it because I think it's a really helpful shortcut. And
Yeah.
that's what we do with language. We want to make things as short and concise as possible. And it's true. And it can also be problematic.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think the context in which it's shared is really important. I think this year has been the year where I've been the most in terms of like the public eye, where I've gotten to recognize the most at conferences or at restaurant.
Mhm.
And so when I say that I ate something, I feel the need to add, like I say, I ate a donut, for example, or a
Sure.
cookie or whatever. I say I ate a donut. Someone's like, you ate like a donut? I was like, no,
Sure.
it's vegan donut. But like, I
Yeah.
don't feel like I need to say it. But this year I felt like I have to say the word vegan, or else I'm gonna be like, people are always looking for you to make a mistake,
Oh, yeah.
right? And so, yeah, I think it's that fine line of who you're talking to and what context you're in. But I do agree with you that it does limit, because if you see vegan and you're a meat eater or someone that's maybe a meat eater but's a little bit more open, you're not going to look at the menu because you'll be like, I'm not that thing. And I love to talk about the psychology of that and like the whole identity piece, because again, you've been on a mission to help people eat vegan. But like you said earlier, there's such a big identity piece to it that if people are, you know, grew up in the 70s and or 80s, and that's kind of that association to like the hippies that we referred earlier, or depending on what their perception is of the word vegan, and they don't want to shift that identity to that specific thing, fully understanding that we are a wide array of, different identities. You put someone in a different context, or they have a new identity, right? But people don't realize that. So how do you help people navigate that? Because a lot of the listeners tend to be like the black sheep of their community. They're like the only vegan, or their partner is not, their husband or their wife is not vegan, and they want to get them to eat, more plant-based, even 70, 80, or 90%. And so what have you found throughout your years to help people navigate this identity piece that comes with eating this way?
So, shameless plug, because you mentioned it a couple times, but The Joyful Vegan, my book, The Joyful Vegan, is a
Mhm.
book about these stages. You said these phases. It literally is the book about the angry vegan, the evangelical vegan, the identity aspect, the remorse phase, because a lot of us feel bad and feels bad and sad that we contributed to harm to ourselves or to other animals. It talks about the communication piece. It talks about the psychology piece. So just shameless plug, it is all in The Joyful Vegan, because I want to guide people in all of these things that I know are universal for all of us. And so one of the things I would say to answer your question first is not to nitpick, but my mission isn't to inspire people to be vegan or eat vegan. It is to inspire them to live according to their own values of compassion and wellness. And that is the crux of the answer to your question, because I am not asking anyone to choose one identity over another. I'm encouraging them and urging them to actually live according to their own identity and their own values. And
And then by
that's why,
default, it happens.
exactly. I mean, look, I am not talking about people who would be diagnosed with, psychopathy or sociopathy. Like, I am talking about the average person. And the
Yeah.
average person is good and kind, and they care, and they don't want to hurt themselves, and they don't want to hurt other animals. And that is why we work so hard to keep from looking at what we do to ourselves and what we do to other animals. We have to protect that part of ourselves that says, I am a good person, I am a kind person, I don't want to hurt myself and someone else. It's literally the cognitive dissonance that we've talked about, that, we being, in our culture. Cognitive dissonance means that we hold two conflicting beliefs or values at the same time. And in this case, it's holding the belief that animals feel pain, and the belief that, or the feeling that I like eating meat. So how do you reconcile the fact that you like going out, you like being with your friends, you want to you want to grill, you want to barbecue, whatever. How do you reconcile that part of who you are and your lifestyle with the fact that you don't want to hurt animals, and you know that if we kill animals, they're going to feel pain and they're going to be hurt? How do you reconcile that? You change your behavior, or you change your thinking about your behavior. Those are the only two options. So either you change your behavior and you become vegetarian, pescatarian, vegan, or you change your thinking about your behavior and you start making all of these, I'll say, excuses. I mean, of course they're excuses, but it's the way to reconcile this cognitive dissonance, and we choose willful blindness as a result. So we choose don't tell me, I don't want to know. No, animals, no, I only get free range. No, they don't feel the same way. No, they don't feel the same pain. No, I only support humane slaughter. I mean, we tell ourselves these things because we have to, in order to keep doing what we're doing without changing our behavior too much. We'll change
Yeah.
it a little, right? We'll change it a little to like buy organic or free range, but we don't want to be too inconvenienced. And so my point is, when I'm talking to people, it is not about being vegan. And I don't want to sound like I'm on a soapbox here, but anyone who's listening to this, who's heard me speak ever, I have always talked about the fact that the point is not to be vegan. The being vegan is the means to the end. The end
Mhm.
is living compassionately and healthfully. That's what I want. I want to be as healthy as possible. I want to be as compassionate as possible. Being vegan is the way to achieve those goals, but it's not the point. And so that's why when I talk to people, vegan is like the conduit. Veganism is like the pass through. And so when I'm talking to people, I'm not talking about being vegan. I'm talking about living compassionately, because you already are compassionate. So how do you manifest your own values, not mine, but your own values in your everyday behavior? So that's the answer. Is I don't talk about veganism as much as I talk about what does it mean to you to be someone who's kind and compassionate, because that's obviously part of your identity.
And I feel, put it this way, I feel humans have an incredible ability to choose to walk blindly or to lie to themselves. And I feel like, and yeah, in terms of nutrition and health and compassion, but I think, you know, people say they want to lose weight, but I'll turn around and, eat chocolate cake and pizza. They say they want a certain relationship with their partner, and they turn around and they do something that would, produce the opposite result. And so I feel like it's like I always trying to boil things down to like their essence. Like what is the button we can press that changes things? Again, I've only been at transforming people for, I've been in the fitness space for probably a decade. But Fit Vegan, we're going on 5 years. You've been at this for longer than I have in terms of trying to shift people's perspective so that they can live this type of life, then by default would lead them to kind of eat this way. So what have you come down to like boiling it down to the essence of the button that people can press that would increase the chances of them making that shift in their life?
I know, that's the magic question.
Yeah.
That's the magic question. If we all knew the exact button, right? So I think the button for everyone, the button itself is them. Okay. Their values. Okay. So I'll come back to that. What the button, like how it reads, is going to be different for different people. Right. But the button, I will say, is definitely not me. It's not about me. And I know
Yeah.
animal advocates would say, no, I never talk about me. It's about the animals. You're still attached to them having an outcome
Yeah.
based on a conversation with you, based on the button that you press. Your expectation and attachment to the outcome is one of the problems. And people can read it when they feel like we have an agenda and they feel like they're being, literally,
Like manipulated a little bit.
manipulated. People are smart enough to know they are. So what does that mean? Because I still want to be this conduit. I still want to be an inspiration, right? But you can see that even in the language I'm using, I'm not trying to change anyone. I'm trying to inspire. And so what's the difference between change and inspire? Well, I can't control the change. I can control the inspire. And so for me, the button is knowing whatever it is that is most meaningful to the person I'm talking to and pressing that button. And so it requires listening. It requires unattachment. It requires planting seeds. It requires compassion and understanding and patience. And definitely it requires you removing yourself from the equation. Because what happens is if we're attached to how they react and they don't make a change, we feel that either they're bad people, don't care, they lack compassion, they don't care about themselves, they don't care about the animals, or we think we did something wrong. I
Yeah.
didn't speak well
Or that
enough.
we failed.
We failed, right? So absolutely the button, the trick, in my opinion, this is my opinion, and this is how I've been doing this for 25 years, and it works not only because I see it work in terms of what I get to hear as the bonus part of that, which is, you helped me change my life, right? That's the bonus. That's the icing on the cake. The thing that has enabled me to keep that has enabled me to keep doing this for 25 years is the point. If I were attached to everybody I talked to and what the outcome would be,
Oh, you're
and
burnt out.
I'd be burnt out.
Yeah.
I'd be completely burnt out. So it's about efficacy. I think it is the most effective way to be in terms of the outcome. And that's the crux. I mean, that's the kind of irony, right? But
Yeah.
I think it's also the most logical in terms of sustaining my own ability to keep doing this.
Yeah. So I'm just imagining some of my clients listening that their partner isn't vegan. So I'm going to ask you like a little bit of a deeper question. So when you're talking to, for example, just a stranger, you're at a restaurant or whatever it may be, I feel like sharing and not being attached to the outcome is a little bit easier because not saying that you don't care about them, but you don't have that relationship like you would with your husband or your wife. And so when you see that your husband or your wife or someone that you really like, your parents, for example, they're getting older, potentially they're not the healthiest, um, it becomes a lot harder to share without that attachment or without that expectation of outcome. Because like for me, I'm grateful I was able to transition my mom to eating whole food, plant
Yeah,
based. I
right.
helped her lose over 50 pounds.
Wow.
Phenomenal. My dad still has his gut, still eating meat from time to time. So it's, I'll have my conversations with him and he's like, oh, I'm struggling with this. I was like, hey, dad, we coach doctors. We've done this 800 times. I'm like, should probably listen to your son at one point. Uh, and then they'll have those conversations where I'll be detached from an expectation of the outcome because I've been trying to convince him for a decade. And there's be moments where I'm going to get upset because it's like, he's just not getting it. How do you balance that when it's someone that you care about deeply?
Absolutely. I mean, it's the hardest thing, and especially the people we care about most and the people we're closest to. Family and friends but mostly family. It's the hardest, right? So the answer is it's not easy, but it is still the same principle of unattachment. It's still the same principle because the bottom line is I cannot control them. I can only control me. And I can only control what I say, what I do, how I act, how I react. That's all I can do. It doesn't mean it's not challenging to do this. It's more challenging with family, but
Yeah.
it's still the same principle. It's not a different principle with family. Now, the good thing with family is that they know where to find you when they're ready, because I've had so many advocates over the years. Oh, I've been working on my uncle, 12 years. He still hasn't made any change. And I go, well, maybe stop working on your uncle. Maybe work on someone who might be more open to what you have to say, because he knows where to find you. And part
Yeah.
of it too is there is this like people can feel it. Now, look, I think it is a little different with our parents because there's
You're
a
still
lot
a
to
child to them.
you're still a
Right.
child to them. You don't tell them what to
Yeah.
do. They're the ones who know all the things, right? I mean, so there's a lot more going on psychologically with parents.
Yeah.
But with people in general, when we lean toward them with an agenda, and this is what I mean when I say people can feel it, they can see it in our body language, they can hear it in our inflection, they can
Yeah.
hear it in
Yeah.
our tone. So when we come forward like this, and I'm doing this for people who don't see me, but you can imagine I'm kind of moving forward like, don't you know, I can, and we're in this place. What do people do when you move toward them? They move back. And so it's some of it is even just that kind of body language. And that comes from your own intention before you even start having a conversation with them, so that you set up the conversation to be more like your hands are back, you're open literally in an open place. And you go, whatever, tell me more. You
Just
tell
like
me.
dating.
It's the difference. It's really true. It really is. I mean, you can apply a lot of the dating principles.
Yeah. It's like leaning over is, I just thought of my mom back in the day. It's like you're trying to invite someone to like a Tupperware dinner, you know what I mean? To give you a little
Right.
presentation to sell some Tupperware. And people are like, I know you want something from me once we get there. But
Right.
yeah, that kind of distance of like, hey, I'm cool if you do it or not. It doesn't matter to me. And just having that energy of I'll be fine regardless. I'm just trying to help definitely makes people more attracted to it than repelled.
And literally, if your body language is, and your whole demeanor and inflections and all of that is literally you're more laid back, what do?
Yeah,
They lean forward and they say, "Tell me more. Like I want to know more." Right?
yeah,
So if people feel like they're being sold something, that's when they start to get really suspicious. And then what do people do in response to that to hang on to their identity even more? They dig in their heels.
yeah.
So a lot of this is just like the art of human psychology, and you might not do it perfectly one time. You're never going to do it perfectly, but you might reflect on an interaction you had and want to do better next time. Great. That's what this looks like. I mean, you practice, you try, you learn, and you do it again the next time.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I found throughout the years is because I used to, you mentioned all these phases, which by the way, for the people listening, I'm going to link the book down below so you guys can get a copy of it. But like all those phases, it was trying to be in people's face. And then I would get the comments of, oh, you're just like every other vegan trying to shove it down my throat. Right. And I was like, okay, well, it's not working. And so I believe there's places for different types of activism. And I was just like, I'm more the type of, I'm going to be athletic and lean and fit and healthy, and I'm going to show what's possible. And then I started attracting more people. So instead of me going to them with something, they're like, hey, how are you doing this? And then there was more of an open door to have that conversation versus a door that was shut that I was just literally trying to kick through to be like, eat your kale.
Totally. That's exactly right. Look, we are all models to each other, whether we're vegan or not. We just underestimate the power we have as an influencer. And I don't mean an influencer in the, modern use of the term, but we are all influencers because we all have relationships with people,
Yeah.
neighbors, friends, coworkers, clerks in the store, servers in the restaurant, parents, family, aunts, uncles. We are influencers. And the truth is people are listening and watching all the time, especially then when you add something that is appealing to them, but they don't know enough about it. And also as humans, we don't like to act like we don't know something. We don't like saying, I don't know about nutrition. Tell me more. What we
Yeah.
tend to do is kind of, I'm going to use an etymology here, parrot what we've heard other people say, which is, well, how do you get your protein then? But if you push them back and you go, how do you think? They go, yeah, like beans and nuts and things like, yesterday at the blood center, I said, where do you think the elephants get it? I said, I get it. I said, I get it at the same place that the animals we eat get it. We don't eat carnivores. We eat herbivores. Where do you think the herbivores are getting it from? And he goes, oh yeah. Great point. Right. Fine. So
Yeah.
the
Just cut
point
the
is,
middleman.
exactly, skip the middle animal and go directly to the source. That's always what I've said. And people get it. They get it. So yeah, it's just a matter of knowing that it's also like what works. If it doesn't work, stop banging on the door and try something different. Yeah, and it's really, it's much more pleasurable to do that. And I'm a little worried only because there's a lot of pressure on vegans to also look a certain way and be a certain way, because I walk this line of saying, look, you're an ambassador. You just are. Whether you like it or not, you're an ambassador. But that
Yeah.
doesn't mean you have to be some like perfect specimen. And I'm not saying this regarding your work at all, because I'm someone who's fit and it means a lot to me to be fit and to look good. Of course I care about looking good, right? I think most of us do. And so it's not just about what we look like. It's actually just about how we represent. And
Yeah.
that doesn't mean we all have to fit some mold. It just means I think what people are most drawn to more than anything, more than, anything we're talking about here, is authenticity and compassion and kindness. And so if we show up like that, then it is going to be a reflection of what we care about, which is maybe, being fit and being healthy and just, and being joyful. I mean, I've put a lot of pressure on myself also, calling myself the joyful vegan. That doesn't mean I don't get angry, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I don't get pissy. But my orientation is to show up joyfully. And that's what people respond to. So it's about authenticity. It's not just about fitting some perfect mold.
Yeah. And I feel like people that are in our position that publicly took on those identities, I for sure there's an additional stressor on my shoulder to stay fit all the time. So I'm sure you feel you're
For
in
sure.
public, you better be joyful, colleague.
Exactly.
So it's interesting you bring that up because I did write down as a question when you were on the podcast with Ellen, you mentioned that some people are shy to say that they're vegan because they might feel that they're a poor representation of veganism.
Yeah.
Um, why do you feel that is? I feel like, at least from my side, because I'm in the fitness world, if someone tends to be overweight and they're on their journey of losing weight, that's why they went vegan, they'd potentially be a little bit more shy to kind of take on that title. But have you ever seen any other situations?
Yeah, I think some of it is around temperament. You mentioned earlier, if we seem like we're angry, or like you said, someone said, oh, you're the typical vegan, right? Because people have a notion in their minds of what the stereotypical vegan is like. I mean, and that's why, I talk in the Joyful Vegan, the first chapter, or whatever, the fourth phase, whatever it is anger. And so, I actually have a whole table of what it looks like to be a joyful vegan versus an angry vegan. I mean, there is a thing called an angry, it's a thing, it's real. that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with anger. It's just a matter of knowing that if we orient that way, people are going to respond a certain way. So
Yeah.
it's just knowing who you are. And so yeah, I think it's a matter of when people show up, I think they're so, again, this is attachment, right? They're so attached to what other people think about them, whether it's
Yeah.
about their physical appearance or about their temperament. And so they're more hung up on how others are thinking about them than on how they're just showing up. And I would
Yeah.
rather people focus on how they're showing up. And then again, how other people take that, that's not
Yeah.
yours, right? So the unattachment works in the other way too. How people respond to you is not yours. But if you can truly say that you're showing up authentically, kindly, compassionately, and passionately, that doesn't mean you are a certain way, that you can never be like passionate or talk about this with conviction. Like all of those things are true if that's true for you. But so I've seen it show up for people in that it's certainly appearances. Some of it, some of it is something temporary, like having a cold. I know vegans are so worried about saying like we get sick. I mean, I have
Yeah.
a very,
It's like, what? You're not a robot? You don't like stay in perfect health all the time?
and it's
Hey,
so
depending where you live, it's cold.
exactly. And we're also human. And I think
Yeah.
it's what I encourage like we do not stop being human when we become vegan. And it is so detrimental. It's so detrimental to set up any kind of expectation. Now, what you do and what I do is both about saying, here's the North Star. Like,
Yeah.
here's what we know to be true if you were eating 100% plant-based versus if you're eating animal products. Here's what we know to be true. I say this in the 30-day vegan challenge. I cannot guarantee that you will never get heart disease. I cannot guarantee that you will lower your cholesterol by 100 points if you become vegan for 30 days. What I can guarantee is that you're not going to be consuming dietary cholesterol. What I can
Yeah.
guarantee is that you're not going to be consuming saturated fat from animal products. What I can guarantee is that you're not consuming casein. And all of those things are risk factors in the diseases that we're concerned about, the heart disease, the cancer, et cetera, right? So the point is we have to be really careful about how we talk about and what promises we make to people, because what happens if they get sick? What happens if they get a cold? What happens if they get cancer? Then they
Yeah.
did something wrong, and or veganism is not the end all be all. Well, it's not. It's not the end all be all, but it's the
Yeah.
best we have in terms of all of these goals that we want to reach. It's the best we have, but it's still not perfect. It's not about becoming a robot or not becoming human.
Yeah, and I frame it as like putting on a seatbelt in a car accident. You're not guaranteed to not die, but your chances are a lot less when you have the seatbelt on. And so there's no guarantees, but the chances are lower, which I'm 100% with you on that. And it's so interesting that I just kind of connected to it as you shared that people expect you like, oh, if you're vegan, you should not get sick. But the world perceives vegans to be weak and nutrient
Right.
deficient, but they also perceive us to be so healthy that we should never get sick. I just realized that they have
Absolutely.
weird expectations of us when we tell them that we're vegan.
Absolutely. In the Joyful Vegan, I talk about this as the last stage, which is you just integrated and you just have to know what to expect. And one of the things you just have to expect is that some people will think vegans are too skinny. Some people will think vegans are overweight. Some people will think vegans are sickly and, weak. And some people will think, they're health nuts. Some people
Yeah.
will think that, right. So, this is what it looks like. And everyone's wrong because there's no one thing. And so
Yeah.
everyone's just going to have a perspective. All you can do is show up in your authentic self and be the best representation of you. And if that means that you're vegan, then that's part of you. But it's not about showing up as the best vegan as you can be. It's about showing up as the best person as you can be. And veganism, because it is the means to being as compassionate and healthy as we can be, is going to be part of that. But that's
All.
not the point. The point is you showing up as the best representation of yourself.
I think that's a good reframing because a lot of people, when they take this on, because it is I think it requires such a strong identity online that they make it their whole identity versus like, hey, I am me, I am a son, I am a husband, I am whatever, and I happen to eat vegan and I exercise and I'm an athlete. It's just one of the component that makes it all versus you are just this thing. I again in the book probably just covered that as well of like eventually you kind of get to that place once you've been at it for a while and you kind of make that connection of like this is only one part of me versus all of me. And for the people that are struggling with their weight just because I'm in this space, like don't it doesn't matter if people judge you for where you're at now because we'll often hear like, oh, this person's vegan and they're overweight. I'm like, yeah, but they're just getting started. Like check back on them in like a year to see where they're at. And so you can say that you're vegan, just know that if you're only going to meet this person once and they're going to judge you for being overweight and being vegan, who cares? You're never going to see them ever again, right?
Right.
But if there's someone that consistently going to be around you, like just keep doing your thing. And then when you are in a better position because you're starting to have more compassion for yourself, for the animals, and for the world, they're going to have seen that journey. And that's going to be more inspiring to them than anything else. And so not just taking the judgment for the moment.
Absolutely. And I mean, so maybe a good parallel for this would be the people who try to catch you out and say that you're still wearing leather shoes, right? Let's say you are. Let's say you're on this journey and you just became vegan a few years ago. I've talked about this
Oh, those
in
people are the worst.
oh,
Like
it's I mean,
I'm not changing the seats in my car because they came with leather. Like give me the money, maybe I'll do it, but I'm not doing it by myself.
right. It's ridiculous, but what it is look, we all do this. When we encounter anybody, this is what I mean when I say that we have so much power around the people around us. When we encounter anybody, we're not even looking at them. We're looking at them as a mirror to us. That's just what we do.
Yeah.
We all do. Everyone is a reflection of us because we're just selfish. And I don't mean that judgmentally. This is what we do. And so when someone does that, so this is part of our unattachment again, is if we can understand that they're struggling with their own, discomfort of whatever, for whatever reason, if we can know that it has nothing to do with us when someone points at our shoes or points at your car seats or that you're driving a car, whatever it is, right? Just
Yeah.
know that what they're saying, I think what people are saying is, how far does this go? What's required of me? How hard is this? Where's the line? Right. I
Yeah.
think that's what people are doing. I think they're exploring their own boundaries and parameters around what they might be drawn to, but haven't done yet. So what I think the best answer to any of those, potential judgments or outward judgments, so whether it's, because you feel like you're overweight and you're on this journey, or because you're wearing leather shoes that you didn't get rid of because you don't have to, the answer is this is just a process. It's a journey. We're all on a journey. We're all on a different point of this journey. It just humanizes you. And it also reminds that person, like, yeah, you're also on a journey. We're all doing this. I'm not perfect. And like saying, like, literally, I'm trying. I'm just trying. And I think people get that. And so it's a matter of trying not to get defensive, trying not to feel bad, obviously, but trying not to get defensive, because knowing that it has nothing to do with you. Again, these are principles that are helpful, whether we're talking about veganism or not. These are just ways to be in the world that's going to make us happier, I think, just in general.
Yeah, and you're right. Like, where do you draw the line? The line can go as far as you want to, or as close as you want to. To me, I took it easy. I was like, I have a leather belt, and well, not anymore, but I have my leather belt. And then when it broke, I bought a vegan leather belt. When my wallet broke, I bought a vegan leather, and my shoes broke, I bought vegan shoes. And so it's just that transition. People, I feel, that are more like type A perfectionists. They're like, oh, if I'm going to jump into this, I'm going to do it right and I'm going to change everything. That is overwhelming because there's so many things that could be vegan that are not, that you're not even aware of. And I think that that's a part that kind of limits a lot of people, is they think they have to like do it all right. It's like, you can, if you, like you said earlier, if you want to call yourself plant-based and just change your nutrition for now and kind of enter this world and start to have more compassion, which is something I want to talk about as well, because that's kind of the whole like shift that you want people to make to then start to eat vegan as a part of it. I feel like once you start eating plant-based, I don't know if, I'm sure for you it's the same, because obviously you're still doing this and you're passionate about it, but it just kind of opens up people's heart. I just feel like people become more empathetic, people become more compassionate when they start to eat that lifestyle. So let's dive into compassion and, what does that mean? What does that look like in terms of helping people ease into this lifestyle?
That's 100% right. It's the same thing if anything we go through one door, but we stay for many reasons, right? We might enter for one reason, but we stay for many. And so, and also what happens is you just feel less guilty. Like you're not holding on to this thing that was limiting for you. And so it enables you to look in other directions that you feel like you can now look in now that you're not participating in the behavior. And so if you stop eating animal products for health reasons, again, that's one door to walk through. This idea, this stupid false dichotomy that apparently we can only care about one thing at a time is ridiculous. This ridiculous judgment that vegans have against people who call themselves plant-based because they're only doing it for their own health. This judgment that plant-based people have against vegans because they might be eating more junk food than that person wants to eat. Just stop it. Just be who you are, show up for what you're doing it for, and be an inspiration and be an ambassador. Just stop with this judgment. It's ridiculous because the truth is most people walk in through one door, let's say it's health, and then when they are now not participating, they're not eating the animal products, they're able to go, oh, what's going on with the animals over there? What does it look like? Because they're not eating it anymore. And same thing
that was
with
my
people
path.
Was it? It's very
health
typical.
first. Yeah.
It's very typical. And it's the same thing if someone goes into it for ethics. Then after a while, they go, I want to eat differently. I want to eat better. I want to eat healthier. It's just the way we are as humans. And so that's what I have to say about that, is that we
I
can
can tell
care
that
about
came from a place of passion.
I am very passionate about this. I am so passionate about this because I think it's a false dichotomy. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. And it goes back to what I said earlier. This is what I mean when I say this isn't one movement. This isn't one movement. And it's the same thing in the animal protection movement. There's animal rights. There's animal welfare. There's animal liberation. There's there's plant-based, whole foods, plant-based. There's vegan. The point is, these are all these different movements that have different missions that converge together because we share 99%. So when people attack me for doing this or attack someone over there for doing that, it's like, I'm not the problem.
Yeah.
They're not the problem. Someone who's eating 100% plant-based, but call themselves plant-based and they don't call themselves vegan, and you're attacking them, they're not the problem.
It's, I just want to add to that because I got shit last month on one of my YouTube videos, an interview that I did, because I didn't talk enough about, I think it was animal welfare, right? And I was like, well, I agree with you, but this is the Fit Vegan podcast. So we interview our clients. We'll have different guests that have different fields of expertise. And so we'll talk about their field of expertise. And it was like, well, you're an influencer, so you have a responsibility to do that. I was like, I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not an influencer, two different things. And I was like, if you care that much, you should become an influencer and take your own time and your money and record a podcast on the thing that you care about versus pushing it on me. Right? It's like, if you care that much, you should go out into the world versus asking other people to do your job.
Oh
right?
my God.
And so
I love it. Oh, we are on the same page. 100%. I sometimes will respond to a comment saying, great, so you're going to have a video about that then soon? Like, great. I'm putting myself out there saying what I have to say. I didn't say what you wanted me to say, so I'm doing something wrong. Go say it.
Yeah.
I'm not stopping you.
It's it's the same with like nonprofit. They always make you feel like shit when you don't donate to a nonprofit, but like we donate a ton of our money to cancer patients every month. We don't go through an organization. We donate them directly, just to help them with their bills and treatments and all that stuff because of my own story with it. And so when they're like, hey, do you want to donate, the money to this? I'm like, all my funds are directed towards this. And then they make you feel like, oh, you're not supporting this. It's like, no, I have, with my own personal life story, I have a mission that I'm on and I'm orienting my focus on there. But there's other people that have a story where they will relate to this and they're going to donate more of their time and energy towards this. And so, yeah, everyone has their thing to prioritize. So for anyone listening, don't give shit to the influencers online. They're being authentic, like you shared earlier. If you're so upset about it, go spend your own resources and time creating a show to talk about whatever you want.
Totally. It's why when people, criticize, when I got negative reviews in The Joy of Vegan Baking because I had sugar, it's like you're judging me not based on the book. You're judging the book and reviewing the book, not based on the book, but based on
Yeah.
what you think the book should have been. I mean, it's so wrongheaded. And
Yeah.
so go do your own work. I mean, I'm doing my work, go do your own work. And so, yeah, it's a real problem. And, when I hear you say that, it's so sad because, you don't have to justify anything. None of us do. Now, I put a video out yesterday that was my responding to people who say, you care about the animals, you care about the earth, and yet you fly, you take international trips, and I host these international trips.
Yeah.
And how do you reconcile that? Now, some of my followers said, I'm so sad you feel you have to justify yourself and defend
Yeah, that's
yourself.
stupid.
And it is stupid. It is sad. But I do want to also offer a way for people to think about it because I know other
Hmm.
people are asked that question. So I'm putting myself out there in all of my imperfection and saying, here's how I think about it. Here's how I think about it. And so it helps people then frame it. My intention, my hope is that it gives people some food for thought to
Yeah.
then be able to characterize their own same imperfections when other people push them. So that's the reason I did that. But even hearing you talk about the whole, that you nonprofit, and then of course you're not a nonprofit, but of course you donate. You don't have to explain. If you never donated, you never have to explain. You're doing your work
Yeah.
in this world, and you're in a particular tax bracket that it makes sense for you. Or not tax bracket, but tax
Yeah.
status that makes sense for you. No one has to explain. Anyway, everyone just worry about yourselves and stop pointing the finger at everybody else is all I have to say.
Yeah. And you want something done? Hey, YouTube's free. All right. Turn on your camera, start recording, talking about whatever you want. And also, just to add to the flight thing, because I think this will help show the perspective for people listening too. Like, I'm flying to Iowa next week. I'm going to go record with one of our clients at Incredible Transformation.
Mm.
I know for a fact that every time I record success story episodes with their clients, we get more members coming into our program. So direct impact on themselves, and then indirect impact on their communities and families that's going to see them transform. And so like that's a ton of people. It could be 100 people with the impact we would have off of one video. And that's not even counting the people that are going to be listening to the episode. That's like going to be us direct impact with the client. And so it's like, yeah, there's a cost of that flight, but like how many animals have been saved out of all these people that have been impacted to eating more plant-based, that either the seed was planted or watered, right, for the 100th time, that eventually is going to flourish into like, you know what, I should potentially try this thing and actually give it a shot. And so, yeah, just thinking bigger picture than just right now.
Absolutely. I mean, people think so myopically. Just first of all, again, get your head out of judging someone else and just think about yourself. And I want to touch on this before we close because you brought up compassion. That's not compassion. That's not compassion. And so I
Yeah.
think the saddest thing, and I do talk about this also in the book, is, when we use compassion as a weapon, when we wield it as a weapon and we are unkind in the name of compassion. So if we're unkind to a human being because we're speaking for animals because that's compassion, that's not compassion. Compassion is so misunderstood, Maxime. It's my goal to I mean, I hope that someday I will write a book. I will continue to talk about it in my podcast and elsewhere. But, someday I do hope to write a book specifically on compassion because it is the most understood human condition, I think, because
Yeah.
there's a notion that if you're compassionate, you're a doormat. And if you're compassionate, you're not paying attention and you don't care, you're not justice oriented and all the things. That is the opposite of what compassion is. Compassion is literally an action oriented value. I'll say it's not really an emotion. It's kind of this interesting thing. Human condition is the best way I can put it. But so when you go on someone else's video or you stand up in their talk or you put a review out of them or you criticize them, but you're doing it because you think you're doing it for a greater cause, but you're doing it with unkindness and judgment and like, that's not you can't say, but I'm doing it for compassion because I'm compassionate and I care about the animals. That's not compassion. So that's what I just want for all of us is to just again, turn inward, look at where we can be the most compassionate. If we're seeing someone else doing something that we don't agree with, that's different than, I don't know, someone who's committing a crime. Sure. If
Yeah.
someone's committing a crime, intervene, stop it, do the right thing. But when we're talking about these kinds of interactions, mostly online, I think we
Yeah.
can all just be a lot better if we all just looked at ourselves and tried to look at that person's perspective and realize that most people are not evil and they're not trying to be evil. I always say that people don't wake up in the morning trying to create as much violence as possible, but we don't wake up in the morning wanting to create as much compassion as possible. So let that
Yeah.
be all of our intentions wherever we are in the spectrum of veganism, plant-based living, whatever. Wherever we are, we could all do better, giving people the benefit of the doubt, showing up with the most compassion and just in kindness as possible, while still speaking up for what we believe in. They're not exclusive, and you're obviously doing that. I've been trying to do that for my whole, career in life, and I think we could all do better at that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's yeah, it's beautiful. I'd say you're very well spoken. This was a great interview. Um yeah, we love I always like to leave people with a little step of action at the end of a podcast because they listen to all this again, a lot of shifts in perspective, a lot of reframing in this conversation. And it can leave people, inspired to want to take action. And so what is a good place for them to start post podcast that they can take, in the next 24 hours to start to make some shifts in their life?
So I would say really dig into what your why is, what your intention is for doing whatever it is you want to do next. Go there, go look at a video, go read a book, go talk to someone, go to a place you haven't gone before that could potentially be a real motivation and inspiration for you to take things to the next level, whatever it is. It does require openness and it requires courage, but what's the alternative? So just go there, go look, go examine your why, and keep being true to you and yourself. Create your own intention, create your own, you know, ideals, and then keep taking the steps one step at a time toward reaching those goals. That's what I would say, was go find out your why, go find out what really moves you and what really inspires you and what gets you excited. And that's the thing, that whatever that is, whether it's a degree, whether it's veganism, whether it's eating better, whatever it is, that thing is going to be the motor, the battery
Yeah.
that charges you and that keeps you going forward, and that enables you to say, okay, well, I'm not going to be perfect. I might step up, but I'm going to keep doing it because it feels good and it feels right.
Yeah. You can't fail if you don't quit.
Oh, I like that. Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
It's undoubtable that you're going to get to where you want to if you keep walking. Even if you walk really slow, you run, walk an inch at a time. If you keep walking, eventually you get there. So Colleen, massive thank you for taking the time to record with me. It was a pleasure. This was our first, for people listening, this is our first time meeting on camera and recording together. So this was awesome. We'll definitely have to have you back on the show at some point. And yeah, for everyone listening, be sure to check out her website, her Instagram. I will put all her socials in the description down below. Also put at the top of the description her link for her books. You guys can go and grab a copy. And thank you everyone for listening. And we will see you in the next episode. Bye everyone.
Thank you. Bye.